All right. Hello, good morning, and happy Halloween, everyone. Welcome once again to the JNE Welding Combined Strength live stream and podcast. I am your host, Shane Sutcliffe, and I am joined today by my co-host, Shellen Okowski. And as always, we want to start off by acknowledging that we are meeting today on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. Our show today will have a few more project highlights, a brief news bite segment courtesy of our friends at SIMSA and the Star Phoenix, and then we'll be rolling into another episode of The People Who Power Us, this time featuring Dan Silbernagel as our guest. And I've got a little bit more to say here, but I just want to make sure, Shellen, do I sound okay? I've got this annoying bit of plastic in front of my mouth here, so...
Yeah, I think you're all right.
Yeah. Just in case anybody can't tell, I'm supposed to be a defective mummy, hence the repair tape. I know that's probably a little bit nerdy for some people, but it's kind of a joke from our QA/ISO process. And shout out to Joni Rose for letting me borrow some of her repair tape so I can put this together. I won't be wearing this the whole time, I can tell you that much. Once the People Who Power segment takes off, I'm taking this off. So, all right, and before we begin, I'd like to pass it over to Shellen to give us another safety share. Shellen, would you mind taking us off on that one?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Shane. Well, happy Halloween, everyone. Shane is showing a little bit more spirit than myself. I thought I'd dress orange, but I kind of left him hanging on the costume front. But anyhow, we'll chat about some Halloween safety. As Shane and I were just chatting, this is the first Halloween in a few years that we're really probably back in full swing and seeing lots of kids out there. And it also happens to fall on a Monday, which just a reminder to everyone when you're headed home tonight to watch out for all the trick-or-treaters out there. And so I Googled, I don't know, I'm not in like a parent perspective of like Halloweening type things. I'm like, I don't know, what are all the safety things to be aware of? And there's so many. Oh my goodness. Even from choosing the right costume, of course, no tripping hazards. You want light colored costumes that might even be reflective, flame resistant. I never would have thought of that, but
Oh, yeah,
sure.
good point.
Face paint, try and use face paint instead of masks where possible, so you're not like Shane there moving stuff around and not seeing where you're going.
I'm sitting still, so it's okay.
Yeah, you're being safe there.
Yeah.
And then trick or treating from our perspective, again, on your way home today, stay focused while you're driving. Of course, excited kids, they're out there, they might be moving in unpredictable ways, so keep an eye out for them. And then treats, just take a peek through your kid's treat bag to make sure there's nothing unsafe in there, and then you can grab a few while you're in there for yourself too. But most importantly, stay safe and have fun tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Those are all very important points. And, it's an exciting evening for kids all across the province and the country. And we want to make sure that they can enjoy it while still being safe and healthy, obviously. So. That's right. Great. All right. With that, we are going to move on to a couple of project updates. And again, I'm just going to keep moving this plastic. Don't mind me. We've got just a couple of projects we want to do some quick highlights on this month. And I will start us off with the first one here being a compactor feed distributor for the potash industry. So this one is being built for Mosaic's Esterhazy processing mill as part of an expansion in that area. And at a high level, so compaction is a process in which potash particulate is compressed, usually between a pair of heavy rollers, to create a sheet of product which can then be broken up into a desired granule size. So it's essentially taking the raw, dried potash particulate and making sort of the end use product from that. And we believe, and forgive me if this is incorrect because I don't actually have this in writing, but the understood function of this feed distributor is to basically take those potash particulate and arrange them in different varying sizes and kind of ensure that they're evenly distributed throughout the sheet. So you're not getting a whole bunch of large particles in one spot and a bunch of small ones in the other, because then as you compact it, you'd be getting varying density throughout the sheet. And that's not really something you want when you're trying to create a consistent granule size. And as far as how we built this goes, now, this is not an overly complicated fabrication by any stretch of the imagination, but there was definitely some interesting stuff going on. So for the people that are watching the live stream, and a bit of a description for those listening in, essentially this hopper has about 7 individual outputs, each of which is its own squared around transition, and on 4 different planes, if you can kind of picture that in your head. So there was a lot of sub-assembly work in each one of these transition segments had to be formed from flat plate. So our press brake operators took flat plate cutouts, formed them to make that squared around shape. And then our fabricators then had to go ahead and fit those, weld them as a sub-assembly or a standalone part before they were attached to the final fabrication. Again, not a lot of complexity in terms of some of the work that we do day to day, but there was enough in this one in that the height location and centerline location of each one of those outputs had to be as close to perfect as possible so that it lines up with everything on site when it goes to get installed. Definitely a cool looking piece. I think anybody that can see the photographs, it's a pretty neat one to look at. And for those that are listening, again, check out our Facebook and LinkedIn pages to get some shots of this. But yeah, that's essentially everything we want to do. Shout out to our parts and fabrication members that worked on this one. It was another great example of combined strength, like we always say.
Right on. Looks great.
Awesome. And with that, Sean, can we get you to take us over to look at some steam coil refurbs?
Sure thing. So we received 8 of these steam coils for repair from a uranium customer up north. I'm sure we can all guess who that is. And so these came into us. We've got 8 of them here, and they all came into us with damage due to corrosion. And interestingly enough, only kind of on the bottom 5 coils, there's about, for those of you not watching here, there's about 15 coils back and forth, and the bottom 5 came in with most of the damage. And so these came in, we had to kind of assess what the damage was, and there were some challenges that came along with this project too, as I'm sure you can imagine, anybody in the uranium industry is kind of just going full bore right now, don't want a ton of downtime. So it was a quick turnaround time was of the essence on this one. And then we also had minimal documentation for these in terms of drawings, engineering, all of that. So there were certainly some hoops to jump through and figure that out on that side of things. And then again, availability of material, we're all kind of figuring that out right now with supply chain issues and such. So we had to come up with a few different options too. One was a partial replacement, which we ended up doing, which you can see here. Another one was full replacement, but just based on availability of material at the time, the partial replacement ended up being the best option. And so, we ended up cutting off the bottom 5 coils on each one and replacing those. And so I talked to our A-shop supervisor, Danny, who will be in our interview later in the show here. But I just talked to him about this, and he said this was actually a really fun one to work on because it was really interesting, just like fitting something or replacing something to an existing structure and figuring out how that needed to happen. So between project management and on the shop floor, it sounded like there were quite a few hoops to jump through. And biggest thing though was this project is just completed and it was on time and within budget. So another job well done, and shout out to both Ravi Mera was the project manager on this, and then our guys in our A shop that put it all together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what, Sean, that's a really cool one because it gets missed a lot of the time when we talk about the fabrication stuff we build. Doing refurbishment work is always kind of tricky because you're taking brand new steel in a lot of cases and welding it to stuff that's been in service and has picked up all kinds of contaminants, corrosion. Obviously we cut these things back far enough to find some good sound metal, but it doesn't change the fact that you can even see in the photographs where it kind of ends. It goes right up to rusty metal from there on, right? So there's another set of skills that involved when you're working with stuff like that, and having to know what to watch for and know what to look out for, so you can make sure that the end result is still code compliant and is going to have the properties it needs, right? So yeah, big shout out to the guys and girls that worked on that one. That's very impressive. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sean, very much for those. We're all done with the project updates for this month. And now we just got a quick bit of news blurb here that we want to get into before we go into the interview with Dan, as there is some pretty important news that came out just last week. So this is brought to us by our friends from SIMSA as well as the Star Phoenix. And this is about Cameco acquiring Westinghouse Electric in partnership with Toronto-based Brookfield Renewables. So for anyone that's been watching the news and has seen this come up, this is a multi-billion-dollar deal that has created significant buzz in the business sector, but it also has a huge geopolitical impact as well. Cameco has long been the world's largest publicly traded uranium company, and it has faced great hardships over the last decade due to low uranium prices following the Fukushima incident in 2011. The acquisition of Westinghouse Electric, which is a U.S. company originally, will now see Cameco become a giant not only in the uranium mining and fuel manufacturing space, but in the nuclear OEM space as well. And as the world is seeking to shift away from fossil fuels while still providing reliable power, nuclear is emerging as one of the leading solutions. And along with the announcements to build new reactors the world over, I mean, we know Saskatchewan's got that on the radar for sure. Long-term uranium contracts are going to be required to make sure these facilities can be fueled and upkept. So the acquisition of Westinghouse Electric and the partnership with Brookfield Renewables will see Cameco positioned to go toe-to-toe with Russia's state-owned Rosatom, which is currently the world leader in new nuclear builds and supply of enriched uranium fuels. Now, Russia is only a marginal miner of uranium. However, they do account for about 40% of the global capacity for uranium enrichment. With the world looking to nuclear power as a cornerstone of clean energy, clearly another solution is required as far as ensuring adequate supply of the fuel goes. And an even more critical factor in this is that Rosatom currently has a monopoly on the production of high-assay, low-enrichment uranium, or HALEU, fuel. And this is the fuel which is required for many of the advanced reactor designs coming online all over the globe, which includes the SMR units, which have been pegged for deployment in Canada over the coming years. And luckily enough, in January of 2021, Cameco increased its interest in Global Laser Enrichment LLC, which is another US-based company, to 49%. And so having a 49% stake in that company is giving them hopefully a position to be able to capitalize on the sanctions and the ability, or the concern around supply from Russia, as this will allow them to become a manufacturer in the HALEU space. And obviously, due to all of these considerations, this deal between these organizations is proving to put Canada to be a leader in the future of nuclear development and deployment, and will also serve to reduce Russia's dominance in the nuclear sector, bolster energy security in Eastern Europe, and provide a smoother path for low-carbon energy transition. So very important news there today, or over the last week. If you want to know more, you can check out SIMS's website, or even just look for the article on the Star Phoenix's website, as it's been posted there as well.
Yeah, wow. Huge news.
Yeah, very big deal.
Yeah.
All right, and as we mentioned, we're now going to shift over to the main focus of this episode. This is another segment of The People Who Power Us, this time featuring Dan Silbernagel, our A-Shop supervisor. And I would ask you just to sit back, relax, maybe snack on some of that Halloween candy you know you bought way too much of, and then the kids are never going to take all of it. So, yeah, everyone, just please feel free to enjoy the interview. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us once again on this segment, The People Who Power Us. We are here today with Dan Silbernagel, who is one of our shop supervisors at JNE Welding, specifically in Shop A, for those that are aware of our company structure. Dan, thanks for joining us. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive right into it then. We're going to get real personal right off the hop here. We're going to ask you, tell us a bit about your life prior to joining us at JNE, and who is Dan? That's a real kind of mystical phrase there that Shalom put into the questions.
Well, I was born in Manitoba. Lived there up until grade 4.
Nice.
Lived in Rivers, Manitoba, which is a very small town. Then my dad, who worked at Cargill, got transferred to Yorkton.
Oh, okay.
So I moved there. We all moved there, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And went to school there, graduated there, moved to Saskatoon about a year after graduated, and then have been between there and Warman now, ever since. Nice. So yeah, it was pretty cool growing up that way, because I got the very small town experience. Rivers, I could pretty much bike from one side to the other in about 10 minutes.
Nice.
So it was pretty awesome. Got to explore lots. A very open door community. My parents never minded if I was outside.
Nice.
And in fact, when I was about, I think, 4 or 5, I used to often, we lived next door to like a fourplex that had, was like kind of a senior's home, and I'd go over there all the time and just knock on everyone's door and chat with them for hours.
Nice.
When you were 4 or 5?
Yeah, I was 4 or 5.
Oh,
yeah,
my
just
goodness.
Oh, that probably made their day, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And I remember that too. I remember there was a couple that I went to more often. But then I remember one day I was looking up the stairs because there was an upstairs, and I thought, you know what? I've never knocked on their door before. I'm gonna go there. And yeah, so I ended up chatting with them, and everyone there seemed to always enjoy it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's cool.
Yeah.
And then it was a good transition to Yorkton, because Yorkton was kind of a smaller
Full of
city.
old people.
Well, I guess, yeah, but that was it was
No
more,
offense to the city of Yorkton, by the
Sorry,
way,
Yorkton.
Shallon.
Sorry.
No, it was just the size progression was
Yeah.
perfect, because then I got sort of the small city experience.
Right.
You know, learned to drive there, and got my license there and all that stuff. So, and the school I went to was awesome too. The regional, which was about 1,200 students.
Nice.
So it was nice size.
It's pretty big. I think I used to do dance competitions there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I would believe it.
I mean, that's probably the only place in Yorkton that they would be, but yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, tough to say. But yeah, probably they host quite a few things there.
Yeah. Okay, been there.
And then I moved to Saskatoon, which was another little bit of a increase in size. So it was a good progression. Good way to grow up.
Yeah.
So around what time did you come to Saskatoon? Like what year was that around?
2004.
2004. So you started at JNE. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were about a year before I did. So like 2010, 2011, somewhere around there? Yeah.
May of 2011.
So what filled your time between coming to Saskatoon in 2004 and then starting at JNE in 2011?
When I moved here, I got a job at General Nutrition Center.
Okay.
To be honest, I never had a lot of... when I was going to high school and when I came here, I had very little goals.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't plan to go to school at all. So I got a job at General Nutrition Center and ended up working there for 6 years.
Like
Oh, wow.
JNC?
Yeah.
Like supplement place?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Which was much longer than I anticipated.
Funny how that works out, eh?
Yeah, but and 6 years flew by pretty fast too.
Yeah.
And I became manager there too, so I was managing for a little while. But then one day it occurred to me that I need to do something that gives me a little more fulfillment.
Right.
And I wanted to get into the trades, but I didn't know exactly which one. My brother was an electrician, and still is. So I thought about that, but I'm not a huge fan of electrical work. And I took welding in high school, so it was the only trade I really knew much about. So I signed up for pre-employment. I had no idea if I'd like it or not. I had no idea what the trade would be like, even if I'd have to travel lots or if I didn't really know what kind of work was out there.
Yeah.
But I signed up for pre-employment and got into it, and it was right around that time that a switch kind of flipped in me.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the first time that I kind of, chose something, I guess, of that magnitude, that it'd be like a career path. And I chose it, and I paid for it as well. And I thought, you know what, if this is what I decide to do, this is what I paid for, I'm going to do it as good as I possibly can. And that's what I did in pre-employment, and it went pretty well. I suppose I should. I had mentioned to you prior to another job. I actually worked for about 3 years before I started pre-employment. I worked at a job while working at GNC. It was for a company called Prairie Transfer, and they were contracted through, they were contracted with the funeral homes and the coroner department. So we would pick up human bodies and take them to the morgue or the funeral home.
Oh, boy.
So yeah, I did that. I did that for 3 years, and it was an on-call basis. So it wasn't always. It was just kind of here and there. But
Yeah.
I saved up every penny on that job, and that was actually pretty much what I paid for pre-employment with.
Lots of questions that could come from that.
See, I told you.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into too many there because there's some that would make me look really weird for asking. But
No, it's all good. And I won't go into too many detail too.
no, but that is really neat. That's another great example. I mean, like, we had Sax on the segment for the first episode, and Shallon was blown away by the fact that she'd never heard that he was a massage therapist that had worked on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of those situations like, wow, like that was something I knew from knowing Sax. and didn't realize that it wasn't kind of like knowledge.
Common
The
knowledge.
fact that you drove around in a vehicle with dead bodies, I don't know that that's quite as widely known in the company. At least I don't
It is
imagine
now.
it is. It is now.
Yeah, it was a bit
Yeah.
of a different experience.
For sure, yeah.
One of my, basically my best friend in high school, he kind of wanted to get into like funeral directing. And a guy in Saskatoon contacted him and said, well, if you want to get into that, maybe, you know, I know a guy who has his company, maybe start with that to see what it's like. And so he started. And then one day he calls me up and he said, hey, can I get a favor from you? And I was like, yeah, sure. What do you got? He said, can you help me pick up a body? I was like, oh man,
Wow.
I don't know if I want to help with that. But I said, you know what? Sure, I'll help you.
Yeah.
And then
Did you realize that this was like a legal thing,
I
not
was
like
just
a
going to
murder
ask that.
scenario?
Yeah. Like, was
Did
this
you-
something where you knew ahead of time that this was on the up and up? Or
Oh,
was this like a
yeah.
Sopranos episode where it's
No.
like, Dan, I need help with a body?
No, I knew that he'd been doing it for a while, so it was definitely didn't seem suspicious to me.
Good. Because I would have questioned your life
Yeah.
choices if it had been the other way,
Yeah,
to be
for
completely honest.
Well, I mean, he's my best friend. You know, gotta help him out. You know?
Yeah,
No
absolutely.
questions
Yeah.
asked. Oh man.
That's amazing. Okay, so fast forward. So through the dead body transfer business and into the welding pre-employment program. So you started that in, I'm guessing that's going to be 2010 then, if you started here in 2011. And JNE was your first job straight out of pre-employment.
Yep.
Yeah, that must have been intimidating, I guess would be a good word to use, eh?
Yeah, it was hugely intimidating.
Yeah.
It was almost overwhelming, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
For 3 weeks. That was kind of the
That was the break-in period.
yeah.
Eh?
I remember feeling that way, especially starting in B shop. It was definitely different to go from welding in a booth every day to like
Yeah.
to you know, these huge fabrications. I felt completely out of my element. But it was good. I knew, you know, I told myself to stick with it. You know, in 2 to 3 weeks you'll probably feel right at home, and
Absolutely.
3 weeks went by and I felt right at home. So,
Excellent.
Wow.
and it was good.
And, you know, I do think, just to, again, jump back to the discussions we had with Sax, that's probably, I'm going to go on a limb here and guess that was largely to do with the people you worked with. Eh? That was a big part of that equation.
Yep.
The kind of camaraderie, the willingness that everyone kind of, you know, there seems to be a real prevailing theme here at JNE that, you know, when we bring new people in, we're not just going to throw them into the mix and see how it goes. We mentor them.
Yeah.
We bring them into the organization. We show them that, you know, we're willing to work with you to help you improve the skills to get it. And that's not to say that everybody meets that bar. Like we know that there's some people that we bring in that don't make it through their probation rather. And that's the way that is, right? You know, sometimes it's not the best fit for them, but obviously it was probably easy to identify early on that there was potential in you. And that was probably something that was very noticeable, I'm guessing, by the people that worked with you, because obviously where you come to today, you know, moving from starting your career at JNE straight out of pre-employment to now being one of our supervisors, that obviously shows a very dedicated path that you've taken in, you know, and like you said, focus on perfection and, you know, striving for accomplishing everything you can in the role you're in, right? So yeah, kudos to you, Dan. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah. Don't want to go too far down that path just yet because we got a lot more questions about your time here and what you've done. But let's back up a little bit and go back to your life outside of work. Specifically, we know you're big into weightlifting is a big part of your life, and jiu-jitsu is also something that you're fairly interested in. Tell us a bit about that. How did you get into that world? What was the path that got you into doing that as a personal activity?
Well, in regards to working out, that is something I've always been interested in, ever since I was a kid. I grew up watching, you know, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, and Stallone, and grew up with all those movies like Bloodsport and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's I have an older brother too, so you know I was probably watching movies long before I should have been.
Yeah.
But it was good, and it really inspired me, and it made me want to, you know, start working out as soon as I possibly could, and I did, and have been ever since. I think since I started, you know, when I was like 10 to about 15, I kind of lifted weights on and off, and then when I was 16, since being 16, I don't think I've taken anything longer than 2 weeks off
Wow.
from the gym. So
Dedication.
it's always been a big part of my life. And then jiu-jitsu, I should say I've always been kind of into martial arts too. I was in karate when I was younger, and then I got out of that when I was about 18. And I didn't do much with martial arts until my friend, actually the same friend that I got into that job with, he started boxing, and he really liked it, so he asked me to come along one day, and I thought I'd try it out, and I really liked it, and did it for probably a year or so, and then one day I went to the gym, and there was a sign on the door saying it had closed indefinitely.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was kind of, it sucked.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shocker.
Yeah. So I didn't do that anymore. And then a few years passed, and then my brother got into jiu-jitsu, and I honestly didn't have any interest in getting into jiu-jitsu. I was never huge into the grappling martial arts. But one day actually the same day I became supervisor in a shop, my brother called me up and said, "Man, like, you got to try jiu-jitsu. It might as well be today, you know?" And,
Nice.
And so
There's no time like the present.
Yeah, so you know what? Sure, I'll come. So I came to a class, and it was like instant addiction.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it ever since. So 4 years now.
That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you in your day to day or throughout a week? Like how many hours, how many times a week? What? Yeah.
I generally have, so I lift weights probably 4 times a week. 3 of those are a little bit bigger workouts. I try to do that. Pretty much all my weightlifting is in the morning before the family gets up, because you know, as much as I have goals in martial arts and weightlifting, my number one goal is to be a good family man.
Admirable.
Yeah. So 4 days a week, I lift weights in the morning, and then 2 evenings a week I do jiu-jitsu, and 1 weekend morning I do jiu-jitsu.
Nice.
So 3 days jiu-jitsu, 4 days weights.
Yeah.
Cool. So what does doing jujitsu entail? I have no idea. Please enlighten me.
Sean's very interested here.
I am.
Usually classes are structured in such a way that there's about, you know, an hour of class time where there'll be, you'll go over a technique, you know, like the instructor will show generally 3 techniques. You practice them, and then you go into about half an hour usually of like live sparring, which we call rolling.
Nice.
So it's basically, and then it's basically just kind of, you know, wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and mixed intensities depending on who you're with, but it can get pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a ton of layers to it, which we don't want to take all your time getting into that. But
there's lots into there.
Yeah, I could probably.
we'll table that and talk about it later.
I'm sure it could be a podcast in itself.
In and of itself,
Right,
yeah.
yes,
Well,
yeah.
don't get me started on that. Yeah.
For sure.
So, okay, yeah, jiu-jitsu and weightlifting, obviously 2 very important things to you, and also, obviously, like you said, your family. Is there anything else? I seem to, and forgive me if I misremember this, but music, for some reason, is something that I've got stuck in my mind from when I've talked with you in the past. Is that another fairly important part of your life? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was worried I was going to forget about that. Music is actually one of my I love music. Like it's a huge part of my life. I play drums. Unfortunately, that's been the hobby that's kind of taken a bit of a back burner.
Yeah.
But I've never stopped doing it. It's just now it's like once a week for a
Got to slot it in between all that jiu-jitsu and weightlifting and baby rearing.
It's the hobby I
Nap
have.
times.
It's kind of the hobby I have in my back pocket, where
Right.
I fully intend to do it more one day.
Nice.
But as of right now, it's just I don't do too much.
Yeah.
But music, definitely. I like to find new bands. I like to listen to lots of different kinds of music. And the drums too. Just I like to learn about them
Awesome.
and spend quite a bit of time
Yeah.
in that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
What would be your favorite genre? If you had to name a favorite.
That's a tough one nowadays. I really like. I'd probably it's fairly broad, but I'd probably say like kind of progressive rock kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be like Rush. You know, growing up, Rush was one of my favorite bands.
Nice.
And I don't listen to them a lot anymore, but they're still among my favorite bands for sure.
Right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool.
Good. Awesome. Well, that's, I think, a really good cross-section of your life, to be honest. There's a fair bit we talked about. We've learned you're obviously a very multifaceted person. There's a lot more to you than just the welder/supervisor that comes to work every day. And that's why we do this, right? We want,
Yeah.
people to see there's more to our people than just the tradesmen and women that we employ, and all of our office staff and the like. There's human beings behind this company, and that's what makes this all turn, right? So thank you for sharing that, Dan. That's a nice little peek into your life story there. So I think now what we'll move to is we'll talk a little bit more about your JNE story, so to speak. We know, like you said, you started here straight out of pre-employment, so you've obviously had pretty much your entire exposure to your welding trade has been with JNE. Just right off the hop, what are some of the defining moments or decisions that led you to working with JNE? And again, knowing that this is the only place you've worked at in the trade, that might be a bit of a shorter list. But you'd mentioned that your movement into the welding trade was kind of a not really spur of the moment decision, but something that kind of came. Was there nothing before that, like in your earlier years, possibly that kind of like set that path ahead of you? Like I know you'd mentioned that welding was a class you took in high school. Had you always had kind of like an interest in mechanical things, or fabrication stuff like that? Was that something that was always part of your life?
Not really.
No,
but kind of.
Kind of.
And I did take welding all through high school, but I didn't take it with any ambition of pursuing it as a career.
Right.
In fact, the reason I took it was because I heard that in grade 11 we got to make a knife.
Oh yeah,
and
there it is.
Yeah.
Funny story, just to jump track. That was my inspiration for taking welding in high school, was that I heard we get to make a go-kart in grade 12. So
that's cool. Yeah, but no. So and we did get to make a knife. It was a cool project, but I did
Do you still
enjoy
have
it.
the knife?
I do. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I
Nice.
still have it, yeah.
Nice.
And I went on to make a few more as well.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Nice.
But and I ended up taking grade 12 as well, so I did enjoy it. I just didn't plan on pursuing it as a career.
Right.
But I did have an interest in metal.
Yeah.
Like in working with metal. That might have partially been inspired by to go back to Schwarzenegger.
I was gonna say
again.
Rambo and stuff along those lines, or
Conan the Barbarian. The
Yeah,
original,
there you go, right.
the opening scene, the movie's making a sword, and and that was, stuff like that stuck with me when I was a kid for sure. And I've often thought that might be like the earliest sort of
the forging of your interest in metalwork.
for sure.
Yeah.
Not to be too punny, but
Yeah.
oh, that's great. Awesome.
That's funny.
All right, well then that actually transitions quite nicely into the next point we wanted to talk about is your timeline at JNE. So again, being that this is the only company you've ever worked at as far as welding goes, how did your progression through JNE start? So you started in Shop B right off the hop, which, like we talked about, was kind of a not necessarily normal. It's especially these days, we know that that's not really the way we do things anymore. We kind of start most new employees at our 56th Street location because it's generally a bit of a workflow that's a little bit easier to start off your trade with. So going straight into Shop B, like you said, first 3 weeks were intimidating, and then you were kind of like, I'm over it. How did the rest of that timeline go? So what were kind of some of the key milestones along that journey?
Do you mind if I back up a little bit?
No, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll just I should probably mention what kind of brought me to JNE.
Definitely.
When I was in pre-employment, Brad came to our school and talked to our class, and when he explained what JNE does, I was like, man, that sounds like exactly like what I want to do.
Oh, nice.
And it's shop atmosphere, different fabrications, stuff like that, and then JNE got a table at a trade supper and told SIAS to invite the two students from each pre-employment group, and there's three pre-employment groups. So I was one of the people invited.
Oh, nice.
And I was fortunate to have gotten there early.
Nice.
And I was the first person at the JNE table, and Brad was the second person.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
So I probably spent about 10 minutes talking to him. And then he told me to bring in my resume, and I did. And then I got hired. I finished pre-employment on a Friday, and I started at JNE on a Monday.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It worked out really well. It was the only resume I dropped off.
Nice.
Hey, nice.
But yeah, so I started in B shop. Yeah, and I was there for 4 years before ever going anywhere else. And I got exposed to quite a few different things in B shop in those 4 years. I started. To be honest, I did a lot of grinding for the first year.
Yeah.
But it's good. I learned a lot too. And then I think it was right around a year and a half. I think Darren asked if I wanted to learn the plate rolls, and thought that would be an awesome opportunity. So I did that, and I ran the plate rolls for quite a long time, probably about 2 years. And I did that a lot, and I did a lot of craning. So I got a lot of experience both those things. And then I think right around 2015, I went back to school for third year welding. Got my journeyman ticket there. And then I think it was shortly after that. Actually, it would have been, because it was 2015. We started the first weekend shift.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which was for the ETA vessels.
Yes, yeah.
And I became lead hand on that one.
Nice.
And then did that. I think it was about 9 months that one ran. And then when we were done that, the weekend shift disbanded, and I got sent to 56th Street to continue lead handing. And that was a really good experience. I felt completely intimidated again.
Yeah.
It was a brand new experience.
That's
Brand
what I
new
was
shop.
going to ask. Yeah, because when we talked with Sax about making that transition into lead hand, it was, and maybe it was similar for you on the ETA vessels, but it was a project where they needed more leadership roles involved, and they were like, can you do this? What did you find that when you transitioned over into lead hand, was it like kind of biting off more than you thought you could chew and kind of proving to yourself, building up that confidence that you could be in that role? Or
I didn't find that so much on the weekend shift because it was such a small and very skilled group of people. But I definitely found that when I went to 56th Street.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot of projects that I hadn't really been exposed to before. A lot of structural, a lot of piping.
Right.
So I felt just pretty new all around.
Yeah.
But I remember shortly after that, I was working on a pipe job with you, actually.
Oh, yeah, right.
And you were showing me a lot, a lot about different fittings and stuff like that, different grades of material. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I'm learning a ton. Like this has been, like, I'm glad I moved here. This has been good.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't want to, I mean, B shop was awesome too, and I really enjoyed it there. But I could definitely recognize that it was good for my career to go to a different shop.
Yeah.
And I spent quite a bit of time there. I can't remember exactly how much. I was a bit back and forth too. And then I remember there was another weekend shift. I went on weekend night shifts for a little bit. We were working on a crystallizer with a very tight timeline, so they added a weekend night shift. I guess that was a key moment. I supervised that one, so that was the first time I was a supervisor.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to a shop and got really exposed to the sand filter vessels.
Right. Yeah.
And then in September of 2018, I became supervisor of a shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been kind of my rough timeline. I've been in a shop ever since then.
No, that's definitely a nice, really clearly laid out kind of chronicle of what you've done here. And I think, I kind of got to flip the script a little bit on what I said earlier about 56th Street being where we kind of start off based on simpler projects. You're not wrong. It's a lot of cases it is simpler work that goes to the facility, but it's not necessarily any less complex in terms of all the moving pieces. We talk about all of our different facilities and kind of the work that goes through them. It gets forgotten a lot of times that in B shop it's in a lot of cases it's one project that's sitting in that building for the better part of half a year or a year in some cases. Whereas at 56th Street, you kind of hit the nail on the head. There is piping, there's structural, there's hand railing. You never know what's going to be in there week to week.
Yeah.
And for anybody that follows us on LinkedIn and sees the photos we post, the 56th Street location is a great example of, here's pictures from this week, here's pictures from the next week. They're completely different. So to be cast into a lead hand role, especially, and like you said, the weekend shift lead that you started with was a group of people that were very established in their careers, didn't need a ton of like direct guidance. Obviously you were doing supervisory functions, but it wasn't like you had to really kind of carry them through the roles, so to speak. To then be dropped into lead handing at 56th Street with the variety of work that was being done. That must have been that would have been probably a defining moment of your career in terms of rising to that challenge, kind of like Shalin said, like, biting off a little bit more than you, or maybe not even realizing that you were biting off more than you were prepared for, but rising to the occasion and, and working through it. Right. So again, I got to applaud you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely good. Like I recognized that it was a very good thing to move, and I kept an open mind the whole time. And that was, I think that was one of the biggest things. Was trying to, understanding that I was new to the 56th Street environment, and just trying to learn as much as I could.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
So we talked about your roles, the roles you played within the company, your timeline a little bit. Give us an example of a personal success story of yours from your time at JNE that you would kind of say is almost a bullet point of your career here. It can be a project that you led or worked on that you were really happy with the end result. It could be a process you helped to refine or implement, an incident you prevented. Is there anything, if you had to pick one moment in your time here that really kind of sticks in your head as like, that was my kind of crowning achievement so far, what would that be? And can you give us a little bit of a story on that?
That's a really tough question to answer. Yeah. Primarily because I think what I'm kind of most proud of on a personal level is just keeping an open mind, and I guess always having a beginner mentality,
right,
and trying to learn as much as I can. There were some projects that I worked on that I'm definitely very proud of. The ETA vessels were one of them. I think that was an example of what JNE can accomplish.
Right.
I thought it ran just as good as it could, in my opinion. It was awesome. It was awesome to be a part of. And the other one is the sand filter vessels. I'm really glad I got to be a part of getting up to outputting 10 a week.
Yeah.
It was cool to see that happen. It was cool to see what we're capable of. Yeah, it's hard to think of my personal successes because it's very much been such a team, a team thing. But of course, I mean, I'm proud I learned how to run the rolls and stuck with those for a long time. I'm proud I got my welding and fabricating German tickets. I got my blue seal as well. It's another accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm kind of sensing a theme there. I think if I were examining it from the outside, I could say that probably your proudest moments are centered around learning. Is I guess maybe one way to look at it. So, and that's knowing you personally and having worked with you, I definitely recognize that's something that's important to you is continually improving and learning. I know that you're always, reading about stuff that interests you and trying to learn more as you can. So, if I had to pick one thing that I would say that you do a really good job of is improving yourself, and definitely you're the poster child, so to speak, I guess, for continual improvement. I guess is one way to look at it. So that's
cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's excellent.
I was just going to say too that I'm not surprised that you answered that question the way you did because you do have this humility about you, right? And I think that goes so far into where you are today in a supervisory level, and that's where all of our supervisors are really come into play is having that humble spirit and that willingness to, and I mean to have a mindset of the newest person, right? Or have an open mind to the newest person and kind of what they're going through. And I know that you in A shop typically don't take on a ton of new people right away, but you did this year. You brought on two brand new, a fabricator and a welder that just came through pre-employment. How did that go for you? And especially when you were talking about like trying to always have that newest employee mindset, like how did that having them with you go?
It was good. I should mention there's Vanny as well.
Oh, three. Okay, yeah.
So there's Crawford, Dreek, and Vanny.
Okay, yeah.
It was good. I'm glad they started an e-shop. I do like mentoring. And I like everyone else getting the opportunity to mentor as well. And they've been great. Been learning a lot and coming a long way. And I think they got bright careers ahead of them.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Very cool.
That's awesome. All right. Well, if I've kind of run out of script items here. We got through these a little faster than I was expecting. Sean, have you got any other questions? I'm trying to think of some other topics that we haven't covered that we should.
Well, we got one question left here. I guess if you could describe to listeners and people watching what a day in the life or at JNE is, or what it's like working at JNE, the culture, that type of thing, how would you describe it?
I've always really enjoyed the culture of JNE. I think it's absolutely excellent. I think that it says a lot about the hiring process. I think we hire kind of based on, a good personality, and it really shows. Everyone here is great. Everyone has been great. You mentioned when I was in B Shop when I first started that the people probably had a big part in that, and they did. I mean, everyone had a part in it, but I did want to mention particularly like Sax being there at the time. I always felt super comfortable going to him and asking questions. Chris Waddington always helped me out a lot too, and of course Darren and Bob Simpson. Yeah, but I don't want to miss anybody. But I mean, everyone had a.
Well, kind of like you just said, you could pretty much list every name of everybody that's worked at the company since you've been here, right? So yeah.
But it's just excellent atmosphere in all three shops. I don't know what else to say.
No,
that's fine.
That's perfect.
It's good. I guess I should say, excuse me.
No problem.
I wasn't sure what, when I was in pre-employment, I wasn't sure what sort of the work atmosphere would be like. Yeah. In the workforce. And when I came to JNE, that's exactly what I would have wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? You make a really good point there, and that's something that I hadn't thought about before that we can definitely expand on, though, because Sax made a very similar comment in terms of how he tries to create that environment, right? Like, you guys are all part of that, the supervision team, the leads, everyone that interfaces with our people on the floor, and, to a similar extent, the people in our offices. Creating that culture and that mindset of inclusivity and welcomeness, that's in my experience, and I've worked in quite a few different shops over the years and quite a few different fields necessarily. That's a rare thing. I'm going to call a spade a spade. I've worked for some real lovely individuals. I'll use that term. I was about to hit the beep button. It's funny, not to jump on too much of a tangent, but Disney actually uses the term treasured guests when they're dealing with people that are being less than favorable in their parks. So I've kind of taken that on as kind of a term. So treasured bosses, I guess, would be something I could use. I've worked in quite a few different shops where culture was not the most important thing. Productivity, profits, whatever else you want to look at, that was kind of the driving factor. And I'm not saying that JNE doesn't put profits ahead of most other things, because we wouldn't be here if we didn't. It's a fact of life. We have to make money to continue to be here. But you can tell when you work here and you speak with people like yourself and Sax and some of our other employees, the culture of JNE is at the core of what makes this company what it is. And it's something, like you said, the hiring process especially, we look for people that are not necessarily the same as everyone else, because we don't want to hire a bunch of bananas and a bunch of apples when we need a mix of fruit, so to speak. Bad analogy maybe, but at the end of the day, everyone has to agree that they're here to work as a team. Right. And that is exactly what I think people in your role, people in Shallon's role, people in our management team, everyone's fostering. Right. That's a team mentality that we're all striving for here. And that's, frankly, what I think makes us stronger than a lot of our competition, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. It's really cool to hear your testimony, too, about coming out of pre-employment, not knowing what to expect. Because, you probably would be intimidated, right?
Exactly.
And not knowing what to expect. And it's interesting that you kind of had that experience 11 years ago, because this year when there was a group of, I think there were 10 brand new pre-employment students that we brought on earlier this year, I had the opportunity to help onboard them. And that was one of their questions. They were like,
am I going to get yelled at?
Am I going to get heckled on the floor? Am I going to, are they, I think they almost scare that into them in school to a certain extent, so that they expect that. And I mean, sure, you work in a welding shop. There's going to be a little bit of joshing around, I don't know, whatever it is out on the floor, right? But I just said to them, no, you know what? They're there to help you. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And of course, I go out and check on them every once in a while and ask them, hey, how's it going? Any feedback, or how are things? And they're like, oh, it's great. Yeah, no, it's the lead hands and everyone are so helpful. And so that's just a testament to the people that we have here. And you're right, we do have a very stringent hiring process where we look at character first and then skill, and of course a lot of that can be taught and learned as well, right? But where character can't. So that's
sure.
yeah, absolutely a huge point of who we are, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that's great. Like I said, we've basically gone through everything that we had planned ahead of time. I guess one question I could ask you, and I asked Sax the same thing when he was on this segment previously, and I think maybe you're in a bit of a unique situation to offer this answer given your time at JNE and having exposure to this company. If you could give one piece of advice to students that are going through the pre-employment program, or anybody interested in the trades, around what to do to make sure that your career is going to be rewarding to you and to be successful in that part of your life, what would it be?
Well, there's a few things.
Yeah.
One is show up on time, and show up as as often as you can. And two would be keep an open mind, for sure.
Yeah.
Don't just ditch the ego. When someone's giving you advice, listen. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's good advice or that you necessarily have to follow it, but at least listen to it and give it some thought. And another would just be to try to do as best you can, and always try to increase your skills.
Awesome.
Like always, never feel
never
like
settle.
Never feel like you've attained perfection, because you can't. It's something you should always strive for, but you it's not something you should ever feel like you've achieved.
Absolutely. No, sage advice. That's great, Dan. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, that was awesome. I'm just like, again, this is why we do this, to get to know people's background and kind of their journey to where they are today. And I never would have guessed yours, for sure. Even just starting like 12 years ago, and like you said, having that switch flip, and all of a sudden you're like, this is it, I'm going for it. And yeah, just hearing your story is really cool imagine like the timid guy whose first day is in B shop going through that and into a supervisory role in a relatively short period of time, right? It's pretty impressive, and it's pretty cool. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. And I'm going to bug you more about the dead body things later.
Yeah, sounds good.
Everybody watch out for Shane driving around. Okay.
It was an interesting job, for sure.
Yeah.
It was, like I said, when my friend asked me if I wanted to help out, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to at all. But it was definitely interesting.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think that wraps up what we're going to be covering here today. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. It's been great having you on the show, and really appreciate you opening up and sharing your story with everyone. And it's been excellent.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. All right, and we are back. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to catch that segment with Dan. As you can see, I'm no longer wrapped up in plastic because, frankly, that was getting a little too warm.
No hives?
No hives. Yeah, luckily I found out I'm not allergic to whatever's in that tape. That was kind of something I hadn't thought about beforehand. So glad to see I'm not just one big mess of hives here.
That's awesome.
I got to say, we couldn't have found a better person to interview with their story for an episode going live on Halloween, because dead bodies in a car, like, how much of a better fit do you get to talk about on Halloween, right? Like,
I wish we would have kept it rolling after we were done being live, because the conversations had afterward were
yeah, we'll almost have to keep a blooper reel from the next one just to make sure that we don't lose any of that little bit of gold that gets recorded after, or gets not recorded after the fact.
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. That marks the end of our show today. As always, we would like to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in. Please give us a like and a follow on our social media pages and on our YouTube channel. And that way you'll receive updates from us the next time we're getting ready to go live. Speaking of which, be on the lookout for November's episode. We have a very special interview with Jim Nowakowski, which will be going live, and just in time to mark JNE's 42nd anniversary of being in operation. So once again, this has been the JNE Welding Combined Strength Podcast. I've been your host, Shane Sutcliffe, and Shallon, my co-host. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys again next time.
Have a great day.